So, I've got a dilemma, right? I want to start a new project, and I want to make sure that it's as diverse as it can possibly be. So I have two teams that I would need to choose between, and luckily I have all of you to help me choose between these people. So Team A is made up of a black woman, an Asian man, and a Latina woman. Team B is made up, of 3 white men. Which one's more diverse? Team A or Team B? Go ahead. Team A. All right. What if I gave you some more information? Team A, everyone grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same college, and studied the same thing. Team B, one of the men is a trans man, one of them grew up in poverty, and one of them is wheelchair-bound. Now which one's more diverse? Team A or Team B? All right, so that was a pretty contrived example, and thank you for bearing with me on that. So I think some of you have gotten to the point that I'm trying to make, which is that's a trick question. There's no such thing as more diverse than. You can't quantify diversity. You can't codify it. And trust me, I really wish that you could, because I'm a computer scientist student at heart. And I would love for there to be an algorithm that you can plug data points into and have it spit out an answer of how diverse something is. But that's impossible, because people are complex, and identities are complex. So incredibly complex. So there's a word called intersectionality, which really strives to kind of encompass what this complexity looks like. So it was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, and essentially the idea is that it's looking at the particular experiences of people who have overlapping identities. So for example, it's looking at the ways that systems of race and gender define me differently as a woman of color than they do a man of color or a white woman. So that's essentially what intersectionality is. And it totally, completely redefined and transformed the way that we think about feminism, because it made us look at things and look at identity in a much deeper lens and think about it differently. And my proposal is that we rethink intersectionality and rethink feminism once more to include individual lived experiences as well as the structures of race, class, and gender that are these structures of oppression. So going back to my contrived example from the beginning, saying someone is an Asian man or a Latina woman doesn't really tell you a whole lot about them or what their experiences are, because Asia is a huge geographic area with multiple countries and countless numbers of religions, languages, and ethnicities, as is Latin America. So people can have the same identity as Asian man or Latina woman, but they can have wildly different experiences. And to clarify, I am not saying that identity is not important and inherent and necessary a part of diversity. I'm saying that it just can't be about who you are. It has to be about what you are as well. And the thing that I've struggled with in the recent years is that my identity is that of oppression, but my experiences have been those of privilege. My identity is that of oppression, but my experiences have been those of privilege. So let me tell you my story. I identify as a queer, brown, immigrant woman. And when you look at that, it's really easy to say, wow, okay, so homophobia, cultural appropriation, assimilation, racism. It's really easy to look at that and say, there are certain checkboxes that I fill, and so there are certain boxes that I fall into. It's easy to reduce me to my identity. And while I have experienced all of those different oppressions, I've also had a family that has never let me forget how much they love me. I've grown up with easy and constant access to food and water and a roof over my head. I was bullied in school for my food, my clothes, and even the coconut oil that my mother insisted that I put in my hair, but they also instilled in me a love of learning and a passion for knowledge and education at the very young onset of my life. My parents still refuse to talk to me about my sexuality, but my mom is still my number one champion and the first person I call when anything big happens to me. And I know that my parents are there as an anchor and a safety net should I ever need it. So when you think about all of those, That's the hyphen that I was struggling to embrace for most of my life. The hyphen between my identity, what I should be feeling, and my experiences, what I actually was feeling. And part of the issue was that it was much easier for me to talk about what I was and my accomplishments and even my failures than it was to talk about who I was and what my identity was. And part of that was because I didn't know who I was, because I was within this constant struggle between my Indian heritage and my American upbringing. It seemed like it was this vast, uncrossable landscape that I couldn't ever hope to cross myself, much less build a bridge over. But now, after years of personal journeys and development, I've realized for myself that I'm not Indian or American. I'm not even Indian and American. I'm Indian American. And that hyphen embodies everything that Indian and American has, and it's so much more than that. So my hope is that after today's talk, you'll be able to start identifying the hyphens within your own lives and start on the journey toward embracing them yourselves. So you're like, okay, Satvika, that's great, good for you, but who cares? Why is that important? Well, on a personal level and on an identity level, there's value in being you, right? There's value in being able to be fully, authentically yourself. So when I was first coming out, I realized quickly that all of my queer friends were white and all of my South Asian friends were straight. And there didn't seem to be a place where I could be fully, authentically myself. It seemed like I had to chop up parts of my identity or segment parts of who I was to be able to fit into either of these groups. So when I was creating Mirrors, an LGBTQ+ South Asian anthology, that was really the first time that I came together with people who I identified with and started to create this voice and a space for our own community. And so we put out a call for submissions, and we were so blown away by the caliber of responses because people were hungry for this. People were starving. Other LGBTQ+ South Asians wanted this just as badly as we did. So we started there. We built a design, we built a layout, right? Then came the hard part, fundraising. And that was when we were like, well, okay, now this has to go out to the rest of the community in Pittsburgh here. And this has never been something that's been done in Pittsburgh yet. So we were like, does it make sense? Does it make sense? Will it make sense? Will our hyphen make sense to other people outside of our community? We set our goal at a modest $1,000, the bare minimum of what we thought we needed to get this project off the ground, and we blew past that goal within 3 days of the campaign. And I'm proud to say, as of this morning, when I checked for the last time, we had raised over $600 to create a space and a home for LGBTQ+ South Asians here in Pittsburgh. So when you're able to be fully authentically yourself, you help give others a space to be fully authentically themselves as well. On another level, on a professional level, there's value in being able to build bridges between sectors, between disciplines, between people. And there's value, and the best kind of solutions come from the liminal spaces between fields. So when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I realized quickly that a lot of the technology solutions we see toward sexual assault prevention has been very symptom-focused. So it's nail polish that changes color at contact with Rohypnol, or it's an app where you press down a button if you feel unsafe walking home. And none of them were really tackling the root cause of the issue, which was rape culture. So what I also noticed was that a lot of the hackathons around Carnegie Mellon, a lot of the products that were coming out of it didn't have a social impact focus to them at all. And so I knew, and we knew, that tech was a huge tool that we could be using to foster more social impact and social focus. So a friend and I created Beyond the Binary, which really was dedicated to focusing on creating solutions, technology solutions, that tackled rape culture and the bystander effect. And we got results. From apps that connected survivors and bystanders with support systems on campus, to apps that connected the nation's Title IX offices with each other, to apps that let people anonymously and securely report unsafe or suspicious behavior at parties. All of these applications were right in between useful and practical and adaptable and scalable. And the reason we were able to do it was because we brought together people who had subject matter knowledge in both sexual assault prevention and app development. And we were able to have people who could speak to both the technology and the people it was meant to serve. So the next question you'll probably have for me is, cool, all right, I'm with you now. How do I do that? How do I embrace my hyphens? So the thing to remember is that it's about adding to your life and your identity and multiplying the effects of your experiences. So the first step is to try new things. I stumbled onto computer science by taking a random class my second semester of Carnegie Mellon, and I fell in love with it. So the more things that you try, the more experiences that you'll have, the more parts of yourself that you'll be able to find and speak about. The second thing is to notice the negative space, to notice who's not in the room, what's not being talked about, what's not being referenced. And when you're noticing that, make sure to step up, to mention and ask why these things aren't happening, but also know when to step back, to know when you don't have the identity or experiences that is necessary to talk about this subject. And that goes into the next bullet point, which is to be authentic, to know who you are and who you're not, to know what your identity and your experiences are and what they're not, the spaces that you inhabit and which ones that you don't, and what you're willing to compromise on and what you're absolutely not willing to compromise on. And when you know that, you'll know when to step up and when to step back. The next thing is to combine your passions. Are you a biologist who loves to write? Write about biology. Are you a gamer who loves classic literature? Make an RPG game about classic lit. There are an incredible variety of interests and disciplines in the world, and I have met people who have combined them in ways that I've never even thought of. There's a PhD student that I know who graduated with degrees in astronomy and mythology, and her senior honors thesis was writing a novella set on a planet that revolved around a star that she had discovered. There is someone in Pittsburgh who is combining her love for baking and social justice by baking social justice-themed custom cookies for people in Pittsburgh. A friend of mine graduated with a degree in physics and dramaturgy, and she stage managed plays that taught elementary school students the fundamentals of physics. I've met someone who majored in both directing and computer science, and now he uses computer science principles when he's doing interactive playwriting. It's incredible, and that's the thing. So really, the biggest myth in life, in my opinion, is that you have to choose between two things. You don't. That's a lie. You can combine them in other ways and in better ways. The next step is when you're combining your passions, you're creating a space for yourself and for others. So I talked earlier about how important it was to be in a space that you could be authentically, fully yourself. But sometimes those spaces don't exist quite yet. So it's on you to create them, and it's on others to create them. Because no one else can create it in the same way that you can, and it's not on anyone else's radar screen either. And the next step is to always, always, always remember to amplify the voices of others and of marginalized people, no matter where you are. If it's a boardroom, courtroom, classroom, out to drinks with your friends, when you're in those spaces that you've created, amplify the voices of others, always, always, always. And the last thing, because I have to say it to college students, take care of yourselves. Eat healthy, sleep a decent amount of hours a night, practice self-care. You can't pour from an empty cup. It's the most important part, is to be able to take care of yourself. So to end, I wanted to talk about how, at the beginning I talked about how I had never been able to answer the question of who I was, because it was always so much easier to talk about what I was. When I was interviewing for a job at the Women and Girls Foundation last summer, I was finally able to rethink that question, that dreaded interview question of, tell me about yourself. And I was able to sit there and say, I'm an intersectional feminist who believes in the ideals and the values of America and knows that we can stand up and fight for them and stand up to them. And I got the job, and now I currently work as a digital social justice advocate at the Women and Girls Foundation, embracing hyphens and building bridges across the city. And I'll end on one thing. So I have a sticker on the back of my notebook, and it's a very common feminist phrase that says, the future is female. And it's true, the future is female. But the future is also Black, Asian, trans, disabled, bisexual, poor. The future is intersectional, and it has to be intersectional. The problems that we face now and the problems that we'll continue to face in the years to come, global warming, climate change, automation, the dumpster fire that's our nation's capital right now, they are intersectional. And so our solutions to them have to be as well. So go out there, embrace your own hyphens, and take care of yourselves while you're at it, because that's the way we're going to fix and save the world. Thank you.